Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Tracy Watts. I'm the Director of the Office of Community Development, Local Government Assistance. I apologize for not having my camera on this morning. We're having a little bit of an issue with some slow internet, so I'm not going to turn my camera on to hopefully not have any issues with the presentation. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about some grant implementation features for the water sector program. Okay, so today our presentation will be made available on our website. It is also then linked in the chat, I believe. We are recording the presentation, and so we will post it on our YouTube channel and link it on our website as well, so that you can go back and review it later if you need to. Any questions that you have today, you should enter them in the Q&A. Please enter your name and email address with your question in case we are unable to answer any of your questions and we need to follow up after the webinar. And finally, please make sure that you type your name and the system name in the chat box. This is how we're documenting attendance for the webinar. If you do not enter the information in the chat box, we will not be able to document that you were in attendance today. So please make sure that you do that. These are the agenda items that we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about where we are now with the program, if we need some revisions, the grant conditions that have been issued, there's a labor requirement for the program, what you need to do for permission to bid, how you would request a payment, any monitoring that we have planned at this point, and the closeout that we will use for the grant. So where we are now, we've issued awards from round one. All of those letters have been sent. We have issued authorization to incur costs, and we have issued the grant conditions to you. We do have a website, our website, a page for you to look at water sector program documents. There's the link there. So we encourage you to look at the documents on our website. There is a section there for the forms that are needed to clear your grant conditions. So you can go to the website and review those. Revisions. If you review your grant agreement that you received from us and you find that either your chief executive officer has changed, or perhaps it is a different person that is listed in the grant agreement that you received, or maybe your address is incorrect, please contact us and let us know so that we can get those revisions made and that revised document back to you for your signature. The grant conditions. These are a list of the grant conditions that you may have. And I say that because all grantee situations may not be the same. It depends on what is applicable to you. We're going to go through each one today, but because it is listed here doesn't mean that you absolutely have that condition in your letter that you received from us. You can scan documents to us in order to clear your grant conditions, but you must also follow that up with hard copy so that we receive that hard copy as well. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out to you all. I'm going to read this because I want to make sure that everyone hears this directly. Under no circumstances should the grant recipient advertise for bids or begin construction on an activity at this time. And then I mean by that an activity that is funded with water sector program funds. Written authorization will be provided from this office to advertise for bids when funds have been released and the plans and specifications for the project have been reviewed. We will not release funds until all the grant conditions, including in the letter that you have received, have been submitted to our office and approved and or cleared by this office. If we review your documents that you submit and we require revisions to those documents, we must receive those revisions and be able to approve those documents within the deadline established in your grant conditions letter. So we encourage you to clear your conditions as soon as possible. If you watch the Water Sector Commission meeting on April 4th, you will see that the commission is very intent in moving projects as quickly as possible. So we encourage you to get these things cleared as soon as possible. And it also helps if you go ahead and send the documents in for us to be able to review it in case you need changes made, and give you time to meet that deadline. So our first condition is your grant agreement. You need to review the information in the grant agreement, as I said, in case there needs to be some revisions. The Chief Executive Officer should sign the agreement. That should be the person listed in the agreement. If it is not, you need to notify us so we can correct that. Do not date the agreement. We will date the agreement when we are executing it fully. You need to make sure you sign the agreement and then return the hard copy to our office. The authorized signature form. This document is what you use to establish who can request payments for this grant. So we do need to have this document approved within 2 months. The directions are here on the form where it says instructions for authorized signature form. You're going to insert the name and address for the grantee organization. Your subrecipient identification number is located in the top right-hand corner of your grant agreement that you received. We can put that number here. It is not something you have to enter, but you should have it, and you can enter it if you have it. Down below where it says type, name, and signature, we're going to require that you give us at least 2 persons that can approve a request for payment. The form that you will be submitting to us, which we will go over, requires 2 signatures, so you need to have at least 2 signatures here. I would encourage you to have more than 2 signatures. We all know that things happen and sometimes people are not available, and you may need to submit a request for payment. So rather than having to go back and revise documents or to wait until someone is available, we encourage you to have more than 2 persons listed on this form. You are required to type their name, and then they will sign their name. Make sure that the typed name and the signature are exact. Meaning if someone says their name is John K. Smith and they use that initial in the typed signature or in the typed name, then they need to sign as John K. Smith. If you use an initial in the typed name, then you need to have it in the signature and vice versa. We're going to look at that very closely. The certifying officer, which would be the Chief Executive Officer, would sign and date as approving those signatures and those persons to sign requests for payment. And this bolded information here that no erasures or corrections may appear on this form. So you can't correct something, line through it. You can't use correction tape or fluid. We will not be able to accept that. If the Chief Executive Officer wishes to sign in blocks 3 through 6, that is okay. Then someone else is going to need to certify the signatures as correct, and you're going to need a resolution from your governing body approving that person to certify those signatures. Box 8 is for our office. We will review what you submit and make sure that everything is okay, and then we will approve this document. The electronic funds transfer enrollment form. We do encourage all grantees to sign up for electronic funds transfer to receive your payments, but we do not require it for this program. If you are interested in receiving payments via EFT, then you would send an email to the Office of Statewide Accounting and Reporting Policy. The email address is here on the screen, and that email needs to contain your vendor number as well as your federal tax ID number. You do not send that information to our office. You would have to send it directly to this email listed on the screen in OSRAP. This is one of the conditions that some of you may not have in your letter. If you already have a vendor number established with the state, then you don't have to complete this form. If you do not have a vendor number, then we would have this listed as a condition in your letter. You would fill this out, the name of the grantee, your address, your parish, all of these items, the name of the bank and the bank account number, and you will return it here to Janelle Dickey at la.gov, or you can fax a copy to our office at 225-342-1947. You would also need to complete the W-9 form, again, which is only needed if you do not have a vendor number. And here's a copy of it. It's one of the federal forms. You would fill this out along with the vendor information form and submit to our office so that we can work with you on getting that done. The next requirement is the supplemental information page. This is just gathering some further information from you about your system and your project. Your grantee name is going to be the entire name of your system. The unique entity identification number from SAM.gov. All grantees are required to be actively registered in SAM.gov. If you were already actively registered in SAM.gov and had your DUNS number, they would have issued you a unique entity identification number. If you do not already have one, you need to work with SAM.gov to get that number. That is not a site that our office maintains or has anything to do with. That is a federal requirement and a federal system. So you will have to work with them on getting that number. We ask for your mailing address. Please enter the entire address. For example, P.O. Box 9, Springfield, Louisiana, 71347. We need that entire address. We also need the entire address for the physical address of the system. Some entities or some systems are operated or have a headquarters that are located in a different place where the actual system is located. So we have to have both that mailing address and the physical address of the system. The contact information for the person managing the grant for the system. We need their name, phone number, and email address. The system operator information is regarding a person that you have that is operating your system. We want their name, their operator certification ID number, if you have that. If your operator is certified, they should definitely have that ID number. You would answer whether or not your operator is certified. And if they are not certified, how and when will the operator earn certification? The final question is regarding acquisition of real property. It is asking, is acquisition of real property required to complete the project? And you would answer yes or no, and then submit that form to us. The next document we're going to go over is your financial management questionnaire. This document is going to establish who is doing what in the steps of your financial management process. You're going to enter your grantee name and how many employees you have. You're going to identify who is signing contracts and their title, who's going to receive invoices for the project, who is going to be approving payments for the project, and that needs to agree with who you identified on your authorized signature card as well. I'm sorry, approving payment of invoices is the persons that are approving the actual invoices for payment, not the request for payment. I misspoke there. So preparing the request for payment, who's going to be doing that? Then this section on E is who's going to be signing requests for payment. And again, that needs to agree with who signs your authorized signature card. It says here a minimum of 2 required. Again, we encourage you to have more than 2. Who will be recording the financial transactions for your system? Who maintains the custody of the checkbook? And who will be taking care of those, making sure those bills get paid? Who is signing the checks? We do require that 2 persons sign the checks to make the payment. And those persons must be covered by a bond or a fidelity policy. And that policy has to be submitted with this document so that we can review it. Who is reconciling the bank statements for your organization? Who prepares your fiscal year end statement? We're asking for you to identify by title the individuals who are covered by a bond or insurance and the amounts. Make sure that if your chief executive officer is involved in signing checks, that person is also bonded. Again, you would attach a copy of your bond or insurance policy here. You identify the name of the company that issued the bond. What is your fiscal year end date? The most recent audit covered and what period it was, and give us the firm that prepared the audit. And then the name and telephone number of the local official that we need to contact regarding this questionnaire if we have any issues or questions. And then finally, they would sign the document and put their title and date. The next condition is your Title VI assurances. I included the entire document in this presentation because I want to reiterate to you all that you need to read the entire document. This document does require you to do some things, and so I want to make sure that you read the document in its entirety so that you know your responsibilities. The document does discuss reporting to U.S. Treasury, which you will not report directly to Treasury. You will report to the state, you will report to our office, but all items still do apply. I want to specifically bring your attention to a couple of things. Number 3, where it discusses that you agree to consider the need for language services for LEP persons, which stands for Limited English Proficiency, when you develop your applicable budgets and conduct programs, services, and activities. Department of Treasury has published guidance, and we will also provide some information to you about what you need to do to meet this requirement, and consider whether or not you need to provide documents in a different language if you have persons that are that meet the requirement for limited English proficiency. The next one I wanted to point out is number 5, which discusses that you will require sub-grantees, contractors, subcontractors, etc., to incorporate the following language in contracts or agreements. So you see there's a paragraph there in italics. You need to make sure that you include that information in any contracts or agreements that you're executing for these funds. And lastly, number 8, that discusses that you shall maintain a complaint log, and you will inform Treasury. In this case, you will inform the state of any complaint of discrimination on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, and limited English proficiency. You will need to notify us if you receive complaints, and you will also notify us at the end of the project as part of your closeout if there were no complaints. That will be something we'll discuss later. Finally, you're going to make sure that you sign the document. You will list the recipient as the name of the system. You'll date it, and the Chief Executive Officer will sign this document. Again, we will post information on the Water Sector Program page of our website regarding the development of the language access plan that you will need to work on for limited English proficiency persons. We will email out this information and inform you when it is available for you to begin that process. I just wanted to remind you to make sure that you include the language in number 5 in any agreements or contracts. And remember that you need to maintain a complaint log as required in number 8, and documentation will be required in the grant closeout process with the state. When you manage a program, sometimes you are required to document that you do not receive things. So I would encourage you to start a file now for your with your Title VI requirements, and keep a log in there so that if anyone came to look at that or they asked you, you could show that you had not received any complaints. Now we're going to talk about the performance schedule. This is a document that will be used to monitor the progress of the project in an ongoing manner. Quarters are indicated on the performance schedule, and they coincide with the 4 quarters of the state's fiscal year. So your schedule that you're going to establish, and I'm going to show you the form in the next slide, is going to begin with your authorization to incur cost date. Many of you have a letter dated April 4th. Some of you may have gotten them a couple of days later. Some of them may have gotten them on April 1st. That is the date of that letter that you will put in the form that we'll show you next. The grant agreement may have a duration up to 3 years. That's 12 quarters. And on the performance schedule, you have enough space to outline what you're going to be doing. You're going to identify each activity as it corresponds to your line item in your grant agreement. Most of you only have construction, so you would identify any benchmarks. You can list the projects separately if you had several projects that are contained in your construction budget for the water sector grant. Any major tasks that you need to have completed, you would need to list. We just ask that you be mindful of your grant process when you're drafting this timeline. You think about the time that it's going to take you to clear your grant conditions and begin construction. So you wouldn't want to say that you're going to begin expending construction funds in the first quarter, because you're probably not going to be doing that, because you can't get your release of funds until you clear all your grant conditions. So just be mindful of the grant process as you draft your timeline. Each activity has to have a projected expenditure by dollar amount for each quarter. Again, this is all lining up with the state fiscal year. The expenditure should reflect all water sector program and other funds that are being used to complete the activity. You just need to make sure that you distinguish the funds by source and amount. So you would list all funds for the project on this performance schedule. For those that are paying for planning costs with your local funds, you would identify those activities for your first section of your schedule, and you would identify that those are being paid for with local funds or loan funds or whichever it may be. If you do need additional space, you can attach other sheets if you need. This is a form. You would enter your authorization to incur cost letter date here. You're going to enter your grantee name, and then you're going to start breaking down your project. Again, you will enter based on the quarter that you're in. So for example, as I said, all of you got authorization to incur costs in April. So your schedule is going to begin here in quarter 4. And then you'll move forward as according to how your project will go. If you have any questions or issues with filling this out, you can give us a call. We can help you. For plans and specifications, copies of the final plans and specifications plus a final cost estimate must be submitted to LDH, which is the Department of Health, within 6 months of the date of your authorization to incur costs and grant condition letter. We also must be notified in writing that all required documents have been submitted to LDH within this time period. We will follow up with LDH to ensure that all projects approved in your water sector program application have been included in the final plans and specifications. Also, any grantees that are using state revolving funds from DEQ as matching funds must also send a copy of their final plans and specifications to the DEQ loan program for their review, and they will follow up with us as to whether or not all items were included. For the rate study, you do have the requirement of 6 months. We have issued a request for proposals to hire firms to work with the water sector program grantees on the completion of the rate studies, and then any actions that are identified by the completion of the rate study that are needed. We will assign a firm to work with each grantee. The firm will contact the grantee to begin that process. We don't have those firms on hand right now, but as soon as we can get them on board, we will be assigning them and having them work with you. All grantees will be required to participate in this process. If you have completed a rate study, then a firm will still be assigned to you. They will review that document and ensure that it is sufficient and that no further actions are needed. For an acquisition timeline, if your supplemental information form that you complete indicates that real property will be acquired through purchase or donation, regardless of the funding source, then the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act of 1970, which is commonly referred to as the Uniform Act, must be followed. Any acquisition that is completed with the intent to use for a project that involves federal funds must be completed in compliance with the Uniform Act, whether it is purchased or donated. If you identified on the supplemental information form that there is going to be acquisition of real property, then we're going to ask that you provide us with a timeline that includes dates and specific actions that will be taken to complete the acquisition process. We will be using this timeline as well to monitor your progress on your project. Make sure that your performance schedule that you complete and this timeline are consistent with each other, and the timelines will match up. The contractor clearance form is required if you are using water sector program funds to pay for professional services. It's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to enter your name of your grantee and your subrecipient number. You're going to enter the name, address, city, and state, and zip code, as well as phone number for any professional firm that you are paying with water sector program funds. You would list the principals of their firm, a description of their professional services, their unique entity identification number from sam.gov, and then you would sign that form. And then we will complete the bottom of the form. We have to verify that none of these firms have been debarred from federal participation. For matching funds documentation, if you did not receive a waiver and you are required to provide matching funds and you have committed to provide matching funds, then you must provide documentation identifying the matching funds as being available to be spent. That means that you could spend these funds tomorrow, not that you still have to go through some steps to get the funds. The specific documentation that is required will vary depending on the matching fund source. For instance, if it is a local government providing the funds and it's coming out of your operating expenses, or you have a capital fund that you can pay that for, then a letter from the mayor or a resolution from the local government identifying the funds as being available to be spent would be acceptable. If you are getting the funds from another source, we would need documentation from that source identifying the funds as being available to be spent. Obligated is not sufficient. Awarded is not sufficient. It needs to say that they are available to be spent. If your project was funded and received points for consolidation, then we need a copy of the executed agreement between the systems that memorializes the consolidation. That would need to be a fully executed document that all the systems have participated in and agreed to. And everyone, remember, you need to have, if it's a consolidation project, you are going down to one system. It is purchase only is not sufficient. It requires that systems are eliminated to result in one system. There is a labor requirement in the U.S. Treasury's compliance and reporting guidance document. I have given you a link here to the document. It's a PDF that's located on their website. There is specific discussion regarding infrastructure projects on page 27 of the document. You need to go and read that in consideration of your specific project to determine what you have to do. There are requirements that have to be met for projects whose total expected cost is over $10 million. So your final cost estimates are going to be establishing whether or not you have to meet these requirements or not. That's what we're going to use. Make sure that any appropriate requirements are communicated to your contractors, subcontractors, etc. In order to get permission to bid, you have to clear all of your grant conditions. We will notify you when you do have permission to bid. When you submit your plans to LDH, we still have to receive approval from LDH before we can issue your permission to bid. Grantees that have cleared all grant conditions except the rate study, we may be able to issue your permission to bid with a contingency that the grantee would be or may be required to repay all grant funds if any actions regarding the rates are not taken as needed. If you have met all of the grant conditions, with the exception of the rate study hasn't been completed yet, then we can consider making an exception and let you go ahead and move so that the project can be put out and get under construction. And we will offer that maybe as a contingency that you understand you still must complete the rate study and adjust rates if it is necessary. Grantees will be required to advertise for bids within 30 days of being given permission to bid. If for some reason this is going to be a problem, when you receive that permission, you need to make sure that you contact us immediately. So once you receive your, you've cleared your grant conditions, we've given you permission to bid, and now we released your funds, now you want to request for payment. Just a couple of things that I wanted to note, and then I'm going to show you the request for payment form. Make sure that the signature of the person signing the request for payment are the same as their signatures on the authorized signature card. We discussed they have to be exact. Make sure you're signing in blue ink and do not use any correction or fluid tape on the request for payment form. If your project involves funds from the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund or the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, then documentation from LDH and or DEQ, depending on the fund, indicating that program personnel have reviewed the request for payment must be included in the submission to our office. Payments will not be approved until we get documentation from DEQ or LDH that they have reviewed your request for payment and the documentation with it, and we can make that payment. Again, this is only for projects that are using the state revolving funds from DEQ or LDH with their water sector program funds. This is a form that we use for request for payment. It is posted on our water sector page. You'll enter your name, address, and a telephone number for your system. The date of the request, what request this is. You'll, again, start with number 1 and continue to move up. Your subrecipient number, your federal employer ID number. Your actual delivery date is the most recent date of delivery of services. So, for example, when you have an invoice and you're in, let's say you have 2 invoices and one invoice is through May 30th and one invoice is through June 15th, you would use the later date, the June 15th. That would be your most recent date as your date for delivery of services there. You would enter the amount of funds that you are requesting. You would enter any water sector program funds that you've received to date. If you have requested funds but you hadn't received those yet, you would enter that amount, and then your subtotal. Your total, line E, your total grant amount is the amount of the grant agreement. That's the entire grant agreement there. And then we'll identify the remaining balance. You'll have that amount there. Then you're going to go further under item 2 and enter the amount of funds requested by activity. And those are outlined as the same that's in your grant condition letter, as well as your, it identifies, you know, if you have funds for construction, professional services, or acquisition of real property. And you would enter the amount corresponding to the activity that you're drawing funds under there. Then you would finally date and sign in the title. And remember, you are identifying on your financial management questionnaire, as well as your authorized signature card, who can sign this form. Those are the only people that can sign this form. When we receive these to process them, we do go back and compare them. If they are different, we won't be able to process. We review it, 2 people in our office will review it, and then we will send it for payment. You can verify when payments are made. There's an address there for you to be able to verify when payments are made. And again, remember to sign in blue ink and do not use correction tape or fluid tape, or fluid, I'm sorry. So for monitoring, we will be monitoring the progress of your grant through your program performance schedule in conjunction with your expenditure data. So every time we get a request for payment in, we're going to compare it to your performance schedule and make sure that you're moving according to schedule. If we're not receiving requests for payments from you and we're reviewing your performance schedule and you're behind, we're going to contact you to determine why you're behind and what we need to do to get the project on track. For the labor certification, when you go and review the compliance from the Treasury Department, if we are required to, we will review payroll documents to ensure that proper wages are being paid. At this point in time, we have not established whether we are going to be required to do that yet. Documentation of your language access plan regarding limited English proficiency persons may be requested. And we will be conducting on-site inspections when you have drawn 50% of your grant funds for construction. And we will also conduct a final one when the construction is substantially complete, but retainage has not been paid. A closeout report draft will be provided to grantees prior to project completion. We don't have that document at this time to make it available to you, but we will provide it to you before anyone is nearing completion. All grantees are going to be required to submit a complete and correct report for final construction payment to be approved by our office. The grantees will be required to have a certified operator on staff operating the system prior to closing out the grant with the state. That requirement is also included in the letter that you received with your authorization to incur costs and your grant conditions letter. And finally, I just want to point out to you all that this is a new program and guidance continues to be issued from the U.S. Treasury, which is the funding source for this program. If we receive any additional program requirements, we will notify you all and let you know. For those that have worked with us on other programs, those programs are well established and processes are in place. This is a new program and we don't have that luxury, and so we are working through it with you all. We ask that if you have questions, please let us know. And if we don't have the answer, we will work to get it to you and get it back to you. Again, I see that there have been some questions posted in the Q&A. If we can't get all of the answers back to you today, we will make sure that we provide them to you after the webinar. And this is contact information. This is my name, Tracy Watts, my email address and my phone number, as well as our assistant director, Heather Paul, and her email and phone number. We are working to hire a couple of persons to work on the water sector program. We don't have their information at this time, but we will share that with you all in the future. As I did create an email list for round one grantees. If once we receive the completed supplemental information pages back from you all, I will update that in case you identify a contact person that I do not have listed on there. If there's someone else that you feel needs to receive information, please let me know so that I can include them on that list as well. So that's all that I have today. As I said, we'll follow up with any questions that are received. Determine if we need to go further. I'm going to ask Heather. She has been moderating or answering on the Q&A. Heather, do you want to open up? We'll go ahead and I'm going to read some of the questions that we have and see if we can answer them.
Yeah, there's some that you can answer, Tracy, definitely.
Okay, I'm going to go through and see if I can answer the ones, and I'm going to read them out loud because I feel like some may have the same questions. Does acquiring utility servitude count as acquiring real property? The answer is yes. There is a process for that in the Uniform Act. We do have our LCDBG grantee handbook on our website. That is for the CDBG project, but it does include a section on the Uniform Act and the process that you have to follow. So if you need information about what to do, we can link you to that and give you that information. If property acquisition is paid for by the grantee, do they still have to comply with the Uniform Act? The easy answer to that is yes. Again, it goes back to the intent of the use of the property. If the system acquired property prior to submitting to this program and prior to having the thought that they're going to use federal money for the project, then they did not have to follow the Uniform Act. But once they made the decision that they're going to apply for federal funds for this project and then they acquire property, they have to follow the Uniform Act, no matter the source of funds. If the proposed project is a maintenance work that does not require LDH permit, does it still need to be submitted to LDH? I was not informed by LDH that there were any plans that would not need to go to LDH. For the project purposes, we still need to verify that all of the work that you've been approved to complete and that we're giving you funds for are being completed. So I would say yes, we still need a copy of those plans. If it needs to be identified in a different way when it goes to LDH, so that there's no confusion from them about plan review, then I will forward that information to you all. Let me make a note so I can follow up on that. Okay. If the funds are in our checking account, how do we document this for you? So if you're a system, I would ask for a resolution from your board identifying those funds as being in your checking account available to be spent. And that can be submitted with a letter from your board president. If it's a local government, we're going to ask for a letter from the mayor with a resolution of the local government attached. Your business, let's see if you're, I can't remember if we funded any for-profit or business accounts? If so, I would say we would ask for something from, you know, the CEO of the system, identifying that the funds are available, you know, where they are, if they're sitting in a checking account, fine, telling us that, and that they're available to be spent. If we are planning on getting matching funds from the revolving loan and they cannot finish the loan, can we get an extension on this? So the requirement of the program established in the beginning that you could only use revolving loan funds if you had already closed your loan. So I'm not sure about that at all. That shouldn't, it's not something that's allowed in the program. I would say that you need to contact me so that we can discuss this offline, because we may need to revisit what your match source is. If a project consists of multiple contracts, can those be authorized to bid separately as they are completed, or must all contracts be bid at the same time? I don't know. I think that's something we would have to discuss, because I'm not sure how you would present those. Would you be presenting them as different plans? And so, you know, LGH may be reviewing 10 sets of plans, and they could notify us, and perhaps we could issue an authorization to bid on certain projects. I would say if that's the case with your project, you need to talk to us for your specific case, and we may be able to work something out. You know, it is the commission's goal and our goal as well to get these projects moving as quickly as possible. So we're going to try to be as flexible as we can to get projects ready to go to bid. Can all the different activities be bid separately? Yes, if you need to bid them separately, you absolutely can, as long as it's a legal thing to do, then that we don't have a problem with that. If the entity is on track to secure a match through the water revolving fund or similar prior to construction commencing, why the need to have the money available to be spent within 60 days? That was a requirement established before we took applications. The intent is to get the programs moving as quickly as possible. That is very much the intent of the commission. So again, if you are using loan funds as your match and you have not already closed your loan, that is not something that is allowed by policy in the program, and you need to have a discussion with us, I would say immediately, regarding your match source. Is the line item budget, excuse me, in the water sector program agreement what was submitted in the cost estimate, or is there a line item budget in the letter? So in your letter that you received from us, your grant conditions letter, it's towards the end of the letter, and it talks about you've been approved for funds for these activities, and it has, again, most of you just say construction and the amount. You would only have something different if you were probably granted a waiver and you need funds for professional services, or if you had acquisition costs in your project. We did take that from your cost estimates that you submitted in the portal for your consideration. LUS has several projects that have different start dates over the next 3 years. How do we handle the 6-month plans and specs deadline? The deadlines that we issued are hard deadlines. Any extensions that are granted for those deadlines must be approved by the Water Sector Commission. If you do not feel that you're going to be able to meet one of those deadlines, you need to contact our office. You need to provide written documentation as to why you can't meet the deadline. And we will have to provide that to the Water Sector Commission for review. LUS will likely issue bonds for some of the matching funds. The funds will not be available within 2 months. I would say we need to have a discussion with that offline because that would not meet the intent of the program, and the commission would have to review that request and approve it. With construction matching funds, as water sector programs used first. We are working on a process now to determine how we're going to pay those requests for payments when it comes to the proration for matching funds. So many of you are using your planning costs as your matching funds. So obviously those are going to be incurred up front. And so if you committed to a 33% match, we would not pay 67% on every payment because you have incurred costs up front that we need to take into account. So we're working on a calculation that'll be used to determine what percentage we will pay on each request for payment. Do we know at this time if Davis-Bacon will apply? Davis-Bacon does not apply. However, there is language in the compliance and reporting guidance from Treasury regarding prevailing wages and the labor requirements. And so I'm going to encourage all of you to go read that information and see what applies to your project. I would also point out that right now we've not gotten information that the Buy America applies to these funds. However, when we have asked Treasury, they have told us that guidance is forthcoming. Again, you know, as I said at the end of the presentation, this is a new program. There's guidance that continues to be distributed by Treasury. When we receive any guidance, further guidance, we will send that information out to you as soon as possible. If the consolidation is between two PWSID owned and operated by the same utility, will a resolution from the board regarding this be acceptable? I offhand, I would say yes. I think I would have to talk to my working panel members from LDH or DEQ to make sure that they agree. But I would think it would. If you, that is something we'll also follow up with you about, and we will let you know. I think we've gone through all of the questions that you all have submitted.
Tracy, there were a couple that I answered at the beginning. I don't know if you want to go over those or if you just want to publish them.
Yeah, we can go ahead and which ones did you?
I'll read them to you and you can answer, or just to say. So somebody asked, should these forms be submitted as completed or sent all together in one package?
And your answer was?
So I said either is fine as long as they're meeting the deadline of the individual condition, just because some have different conditions. Let's see. For the FMQ, is it the number of employees, or for this is the total number of employees for the city or for the water department? So for the FMQ, it's for the.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say it's for the municipality.
Right, because the point of that questionnaire is to look at your internal controls. So some systems, some local governments don't have a large staff. So you may have the same person doing a lot of functions just because that's the only number of persons that you have. And that's why we need to have that number.
The next question, can the project that was awarded be broken into multiple projects and bid independently? Which I know on CDBG we've allowed, but I'm not sure if they needed to get permission to do that or if there was any special thing that we needed to look at.
I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it's going to go back to how you do your plans and specs. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but we will forward it. I think more than one grantee is going to have that because some of these approved applications had multiple projects within the application. And so you're probably going to be breaking it up into different contracts to bid it out.
On the on the performance schedule, do they only include the water sector funds or do they include all funds? So I said that they should include all funds and identify them separately.
That is correct.
And the contractor clearance form is that if the professional services are being paid with match funds, or if the professional services are being paid with match funds, is that form required? And it is not. It's
no, if we're not using water sector program funds, we're not requiring that. But just so you know, we will do a clearance, and we'll send you that and let you know that when we get your when we give you permission to bid, we'll tell you this, but you're going to have to do that form for your contractors as well once you have bid your projects and identified who they are.
The next one I answered and now I'm not sure about. So if an entity is obligated its second tranche of ARPA funds as the match, but has not received those funds yet, would a resolution obligating those funds when they are received be sufficient to show their availability? And I said yes, but I worried about the deadline now. So.
Yes, send us that resolution because we can also verify that in our system because we were the office that provides that and we know what your payment will be. So your resolution needs to include that it was obligated and the amounts that you are obligating from those funds.
And then I think this is the last one. How soon can we expect the rate study to be completed? We had one done previously during the application process.
As I mentioned before, the request for proposal has been issued. I think that the submissions are due.
I think it's May 2nd.
In May?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have to review and do our selection and then negotiate and issue contracts. And the intent is to issue it with multiple firms so that we don't have one firm trying to service all 107 or 120, however many grants we've made. We will have multiple firms so that they will have a smaller number to work with and we can get it done quicker. So I hope to have firms on board and ready to go by beginning of June. And then they will contact you and work through the process. Everyone's probably going to be slightly different as to how prepared they are and where they are, but the process and the rate study that's going to be required and what they're looking at is going to be a consistent format.
That's all I have, Tracy.
Okay. So I guess I just want to close out with thanking you all for coming and attending today. We appreciate you taking the time to do it. We will try to answer as many questions as we can for you all when you have them and deal with issues that arise. Again, everybody's project is a little different, and this is a new program, and so we're going to be doing the best we can to be as responsive to you as we can. Our contact information is there on the screen. You can contact us if you have any issues. If you feel like it's not going to be a quick answer session, I would suggest that you email and ask to schedule a time to talk to us and let us know what the discussion is about so that we can be prepared and we can have any persons that need to be a part of that discussion with us on the call. So thank you all, and y'all have a good day.